You don't become a true product manager until you've killed features.
Meesho is currently one of the top 3 e-commerce companies in India now. 3 reasons why it was able to reach this far.
Bangalore has a lot of different type of users.
Yeah, HSR and core Mangla people.
There are many categories which are completely unreturnable on other products, on other websites, but are returnable on Meesho.
How do you make money? Unfortunately, most people don't know what is culture fit until they get rejected. How can people prepare for it?
Pricing is the main reason that these users are unfulfilled today.
Somebody who has been working for 8-10 years, how much they can expect to make, both in terms of salary and ESOPs. What's your take on product management at Meesho? What's your philosophy around it?
So yeah, I think a couple of things, right? So I think product management, as you said, is very new, and we as a community are still sort of discovering it in some sense. I think the good thing is now we have a lot of these India-focused product companies, whether it's Meesho, whether it's other companies like Swiggy, etc. Every one of these is building for India. And they're solving problems which are unique to this market, and therefore they can't necessarily carry the same culture or the same processes that were built in other markets. You can do some of it because some of the things obviously transcend these things, but some other things you will have to do innovatively.
Yeah.
So when I started in product, let's say 7-8 years back, a lot of things were not as sort of obvious. We used to do a lot of, hey, it's built here, it's built there, let's build it out. Versus the approach that I talked about, that, hey, do understand the users and then understand their problem and then you come to the solution. So that I think has evolved a lot. I think a lot of the people now get trained on this much better than what we were trained maybe 5-7 years back. We were still sort of getting there. And Meesho has a lot of systems and processes that allow this to happen, right? So even sort of our processes of building a feature require all of these things to be detailed out.
Can you be a little specific as to maybe one feature that you can talk about which is live and the customers appreciate? How did you go about whether you should build it? How did you go about building it? And how did you realize if it was useful enough for the users? Basically, the typical approach that you take to identify a customer problem and solve it with the product management practice that you have at Meesho.
Yeah. So I'll just take a case of let's say the review synthesis, the type of stuff that we did. So we knew that people who consume the ratings and review sections on Meesho tend to have a better outcome in terms of their appreciation for the product, and therefore their quality detractions are lesser, their general ratings are better. And therefore their experience is better on the app, right? And post app also, the actual product experience. So we knew that this was a problem, that not everyone can understand this to the full extent. Plus, like consuming hundreds and hundreds of reviews is not also humanly possible in the time, right? It's very draining. So the team came up with this solution that, hey, we want to summarize some of these things. And we want to create these clear tags on the different aspects of a product.
Okay.
How good is the color? How good is the fabric? How good is the fitting?
Yes.
And all of these things became like a summarized version of the whole reviews.
Okay.
And these tags sort of got created. They became visible to users, and they helped them make better decisions to purchase. So there are multiple ways in which we sort of go about this, right? So the first part is like exploring the problem in depth. So can you understand why the problem is happening? Can you understand where it's coming from? And just focus on that. So we don't, in this session where we create like a document that talks only about the problems, we don't go deeper into solutions.
Okay.
Once that is done, we understand the problem to a good depth. Then is when the PM sort of dives into solutioning. And then they come up with different approaches, different solutions. They also do user testing. They actually make prototypes. They go out, they test it with users. They understand their response. What did the users understand? What did they not understand? And then finally, once that is kind of gone through, it's gotten approved, then we go into actual testing. And in this kind of a feature, you see that your on a 5-point scale, your number of 1 and 2 ratings reduce significantly, and your 3, 4, 5 ratings increase. So you start seeing that for a control group of users, they start having a better experience in terms of what they're purchasing. You also start seeing that products which have very negative reviews, people start buying less of them. Products which have positive reviews, people start buying more of them. And because these people have a good experience on their physical products, they're also coming back more frequently. They start using these features as a decision maker also. So these kind of things you kind of see in the experiment, and then you finally take a launch decision. Okay, but that's kind of the journey. Those are the 3-4 steps that go in this, and that is how a feature like this would be explored.
No, this was very helpful, and also I think the process is elaborate enough to ensure that whatever you have shipped, you also have proper systems to know whether it has been helpful or not.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes what happens is if you don't have proper ways to measure whether it's being effective enough, you can't roll it back.
Correct.
And for many of the product companies, one of the things that they need to ensure is being aware of what's not actually contributing.
Yeah.
Because not every feature that you ship is going to be useful.
Yeah.
And eventually the product becomes very bloated.
Yes. And there was a mentor who I had who used to say this, that you don't become a true product manager until you've killed features. 100%. So people make features, but real experience comes from when you've had to decide that, hey, this is just not working.
Yeah.
We have to shut it down. Maybe the ecosystem has changed, or maybe the product life cycle is done, or something new has come, a new technology surpasses that. So that is really something that we have to always keep an eye out for.
So Aditya, Meesho is currently one of the top 3 e-commerce companies in India now. My question to you is, if you had to pinpoint to only 3 reasons why it was able to reach this far and kind of become the market leader in its core segment, what would those be?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the culture that the CEO and that the leadership has built in the company. And there are a lot of things which I feel are very distinct, and they're actually lived throughout, right? Across the company, not just in product, but other functions also, right? So if I have to pick 3, I would say the first is just being very, very user first. There are a lot of rituals, a lot of things that we do to get close to our users. We don't assume things. We go out, we talk to them, both on the user side, seller side, also on the fulfillment side, right? Like you talk to your people who are delivering products. You try to understand what are the challenges that they're facing, and we celebrate those learnings. They might not always lead to a growth in business, but they'll always be those learnings that help us get those insights. So that is first, and there are a lot of things like we call it listen or die. For newer incoming people, we call it like dice, that go out and talk to people. So that is one, which has allowed us to understand these users at a maybe more granular and more insightful level than maybe someone else who's not done all of that homework. The second is being very problem driven. So we call it problem first mindset, which is how do you think about the problem and really explore the problem first before jumping to solve it.
Okay.
Right. So I think this augments your user first thinking that, hey, I understand my user. I understand the problems that they have. And then I really understand it deep enough to find the right solution. So it's not a surface level thing that, hey, I'm trying to put some band-aid on top of, whatever the gaping problem is. It is going deeper, understanding how the problem is, what is the origin of the problem, how many different aspects does it have, how many can we solve, can we not solve, right? So this whole focus on just understanding deeply that where does the problem come from the users. Is it perception? Is it actual problem, right? Like, is it something to do with the way that they've had a different experience in the past? And then how do you come back and attack it? And how do you really solve that core user need? So we call it problem first mindset. It couples really well with the user first thinking that we have.
Okay.
And then the last one, which is very interesting, and I've maybe explored it more in Meesho before, like my other roles before Meesho, was bold experimentation. So we're very bold in terms of our thinking. We're very ambitious. We want people to give us more ideas, like as a culture, right? We do a lot of bottoms up innovation. So everyone in the company is kind of empowered to bring about the best ideas, bubble it up, build something that they feel that yes will add a lot of value to our users, right? And we don't always optimize for the short run. So many of these things will maybe have a short term downside, but a long term upside.
Okay.
And we're willing to take that sort of mindset when we're launching these features, these products, and make sure that yes, in the long run, it will be something that is useful. Maybe in the short run, it doesn't add as much perceived value that we have that we're able to attribute to it, but it's still worth making.
Any examples that you can talk about to make it clearer?
We call it VSKU pricing. So basically, it's like small shirt, medium shirt, large shirt should be priced differently. Most platforms you will see that this is the case, but it was not the case on Meesho some time back.
Okay.
For a core user group, which is let's say women, it doesn't really matter. So for adults, small, medium, large, the pricing variation is not very big. But if you look at kids, which was a very small category at some point, this was not the case, right? If you buy a dress for a small girl who's 2 years old versus a 4-year-old versus an 8-year-old, the pricing actually varies a lot because a lot of things change in that.
Yes.
This was not enabled, and this was something that we kind of had this feeling that yes, it is the right thing to be done in the long run. It might have it is something which is very complicated because back end, all of the systems now need to have this kind of parameter and this information. And it required a lot of changes to get it done. But we really bet on it. We put the investment to make sure that this happens. And it enabled that category to grow significantly on the platform. So those kind of decisions in a generally scaled company never happen because you're always optimized on whatever spreadsheet math that tells you कि यार ये feature banana, and that generally happens with the bigger parts of the business, right? So if something is already scaled on the platform, adding little bit to it in percentage terms or something will drive business a lot more than something like this. But this core unlock is something that you have to have those gut flywheel kind of decisions.
That makes perfect sense. And I think there is a lot to learn actually for the smaller companies which are still trying to figure out what is the right way to build a product culture. Which actually starts with building a good user-centric culture. If you somehow empower everyone to contribute to identifying what are the problem statements that the company should focus on, then I think you will not have a dearth of problems to think about. Many companies, many teams sometimes get lost and they worry about do we really have some clear problems to work on? Big ideas to work on. Instead of actually just listening to what the users are asking for. And sometimes they might ask for something that doesn't make sense, but in most cases there is some user insight there.
And I think I've also seen it in action in Meesho, right? So every time we're working on an area, because of this culture, we're able to keep identifying newer needs and identifying newer initiatives. And every time I think, yaar, ab is area mein to I've done like a kick-ass job and there can be nothing more. Then somebody in the team will come up and say, hey dude, we don't have this, we don't have that. And it just makes the whole thing goes to the next level. And having that culture of people being able to come up, even in this sort of, even despite being so big as an organization, as the number of volumes that we're handling, etc. I think that is really tremendous and it has a lot of value.
So Aditya, how do you explain Meesho's business model to someone who is not familiar with it? Can you explain it to someone who is a 5-year-old?
Sure. So yeah, I think the way to think about this is Meesho is catering to the bigger broad base of Indian users, the tier 2, tier 3 users who have very different needs from the tier 1 users. So a lot of tier 2, tier 3 users buy unbranded products, buy local market products. And that is what we see when we go to any smaller town or any village, right? So the Meesho's business model is an e-commerce platform for those users as opposed to the tier 1 users. So I think if I could differentiate, that's the core differentiation that would be there. The other way to look at it has been the commercial street. When you go inside, what kind of selection you get versus the mall outside. So Flipkart, Amazon tend to be more closer to the malls. They have more branded selection. They have well-known established brands being sold and more visible on their websites and on their apps, versus we have more unbranded selection being visible, which was generally not available on any other app. So the 5-year-old would be mall mein jana hai ya fir gali mein jana hai.
Okay, so is it related to just the product quality, or also price? How do you distinguish between these two different types of users?
I would say more it is around price, that these users are more price sensitive and their needs are very different. So selection is very different, right? So if you look at tier 1 towns, they tend to buy a lot of products which are very similar, like men will wear blacks and whites. But you go to tier 2, tier 3 town, they will wear a little bit more color. Women will also have a lot of different colors of kurtis, saris that they wear. So that selection in itself is very different from the selection that is sold on the other websites. So that's the core differentiator of why we are able to cater to a tier 3, tier 4 market, tier 2 market. Whereas like some of the other older firms tend to have a more bigger focus on tier 1 markets.
How do you make money?
So I think there are multiple things. We don't do commissions. So we don't have, a 15% cut on every single sales that we make. That is purposeful. That is the way that we make sure our pricing is the best in the market, because we know that pricing is the main reason that these users are unfulfilled today. What we do is we tend to make more money out of advertising. We make more money out of financial services. So those are more our revenue streams.
Okay.
And our business model tends to be a little bit more sort of leaner in that fashion. And similarly, our teams, our whole structure seems to be a little bit leaner, which is more oriented towards how do we get the best prices for our consumers.
So basically, all these services make sure that the end users eventually get the lowest prices.
Correct.
Okay. Like if we had to clearly define the different user segments in India from the point of view of e-commerce, what would be those segments? Because you said a tier 1 and tier 2, tier 3, but that's very broad.
Yeah.
If we have to be a little more specific, given your experience at Meesho and prior to that at Amazon, what do you think are the different segments for e-commerce?
Okay, interesting question. I think it's very hard to say ki this is the line and this segment is here and that segment is here, because you can always say that, hey, well, let's say we say tier 1, right? Tier 1 is Bangalore, but Bangalore has a lot of different type of users.
Yeah.
Some people will value convenience, right? And they'll say, everything in 10 minutes is possibly the best.
HSR and Kormangla people.
Yeah, HSR, Kormangla, like all of the people who work in bigger offices, right? Who are more pressed for time because they're stuck in their work days. But there is a certain set of users even in these bigger cities who are more price conscious and who will say, it's absolutely fine. I'm going to wait for maybe 2 days, get my package in 2, 3, 4 days. As long as it is better in terms of the pricing customer value proposition that I want. So I think it's a spectrum. One way to look at it is a social economic strata in terms of where the preference is. Other way is also the time, right? Some shopping behavior is very different in tier 2, tier 3 towns where they have a lot more time. So they're a lot more sort of just browsing based, right? Like we call it discovery based experience where people are like, okay, I'm free. Instead of using Instagram as much or TikTok as much or whatever, right? Like instead of doing social media, the shopping apps also become a way to just spend time, which is not very prevalent in a tier 1 market.
People do that.
Yes, a lot of people just come, they browse, they might not buy something, they might wishlist it, they might save it for later, but they're just going through the app to see what's trending, what's new. They have that time, they keep this shortlisting process keep going on, and then over time they decide what to purchase.
Kind of like these transaction focused platforms become more like engagement platforms for them.
Correct.
This is new because I don't think anyone in my circle uses Myntra or Flipkart like this.
Correct.
Ensuring that Meesho remains the best priced platform in the country must involve significant complexity.
Yeah.
Can you share how you balance supplier profitability and customer affordability? It must be very tricky for you guys.
Yeah. So I think the way to look at it this is, and if you think about how especially tech companies scale, um, I think your tech systems, your code should be very similar to the strategy that you have. So what I mean is, when a platform like let's say Amazon scaled, right? They had a lot of tech, a lot of systems built around how do we give the right promises to users in terms of delivery speed. How do we ensure that we adhere to those speeds? How do we measure that, right? A lot of things went into developing those systems.
Yeah.
I think the same is going to be sort of Meesho's moat, where we will make sure that our pricing systems are probably going to be a little bit more advanced than the rest of the e-com players, right? And that's obviously going to be the case because we will have to keep innovating. It's as I said, it's a dynamic field, so you would expect everyone else to also kind of catch up. But just from a focus perspective, it'll be very important for Meesho. So the way that I generally think about it is that my tech systems and my code has to talk to my strategy, which means if the company strategy is to move more and more towards better prices, I have to have ways to offer those prices to my users. And therefore, whatever initiatives I take have to be sort of multifold in that space and have to be very fast, have to be very agile, we have to build for those systems. So therefore, my pricing systems will always look a little bit different than, let's say, competitors' pricing systems because we've sort of over-invested there or we continue to focus there. In terms of how do we make sure that supplier profitability and sort of end user pricing is managed, I think the main thing is that we don't take any commissions. So suppliers are actually very free to price their product at the place at which they are comfortable.
Okay.
What we try and make sure we do is we make sure we get the right kind of suppliers who are able to offer those prices. And that goes back to the selection strategy. In an unbranded market, because quality varies, price varies a lot, you're able to get more and more sellers who can produce things at a much more cheaper rate. They're offering it from their own sort of centers across the country.
Yeah.
Which are more cheaper to sort of maintain, more cheaper to upkeep, and therefore the entire network, in some sense, is designed to keep the
Price
low, right? Which is where when you compare it to, let's say, another platform, you'll say, hey, but this is so cheap versus, let's say, another platform which is maybe more expensive for a similar looking product. And yes, that is the case, but the case is because the selection is very different and the origin of the selection is very different. So that is really what unlocks a lot of this. There are obviously other things, but that is one big part of the game.
Okay. No, that's interesting, and I think it has a lot to do with setting pricing as a core lever from the very beginning, and then backtracking from there to take all the decisions to make sure, okay, this remains our competitive advantage. Because I have seen this to be the case with Meesho from the very, very beginning. Pricing is where we will play. So if that's how you approach how to build products, then what do you look for when you actually hire for your team? For a PM candidate, what's non-negotiable for you? And what are the things that you look for when hiring a PM candidate? Can you also talk about what are the standard rounds for early PM roles at Meesho, and what do you look for there?
So, okay. So, yeah, I think there are 2-3 things that we're looking for. So, the PM's role, if somebody has to be successful, basically trying to backtrack from there and saying, Acha, if these attitudes or these behaviors exist in this person, their chances of success are higher. So, that's the broad philosophy. Now, there are 2-3 things which are required for this. One is PM is an orchestrator. They are supposed to work with tech, design, product, other business units. They're also owners of their sort of their problem. So they're also supposed to communicate to senior leadership. So one part that is very critical is just being able to knit all of this together and communicate. So we look at good communication skills. That's one thing that is very critical. The other thing, which especially at the early stages we look for, is problem solving. That our people, our candidates, our potential future Meesho employees able to understand the problem and break it down, structure it in a way that, yes, it makes sense to approach it and actually solve the core hypothesis that we have. So problem solving is the other one that I feel is something we really look for. And the third one is obviously whether we feel comfortable that this person can come in and be with Meesho for a long time. Whether they're truly interested in product management, because product management is also hard. It's a developed skill that you're making some of these decisions for your users without knowing that you're doing this, and it's also very expensive to be wrong.
Yeah.
Tech, design, the whole cycle is just so big. You'll have 3 or 4 engineers working on it. You'll have testing. It's a 2-3 month time frame that every feature goes through. So this ability to get this judgment right is also something that we look for. So our rounds are structured similarly. We have a couple of rounds on problem solving, where we try to make sure that yes, the person is able to structure his approach, do case studies, etc. We also, in some cases, go through an assignment where we're trying to make sure we understand the person's ability to go deep, and not everyone does that well in an interview setup. So therefore, this becomes their ability to do that in a relatively time-free zone without somebody looking over their shoulder. It also allows them to get an understanding and appreciation of the type of problems that we look at in Meesho, get to understand users' pain points in real time. And then finally, we look at a culture fitment, which is like sort of the last round where the leadership kind of evaluates whether culturally this person will have a good time if they were to come into a setup like Meesho, whether we are a good fit for them. So those are the 3 broad discussions.
Can we spend a little bit of time on the final step? Because one thing that I have seen in our community also, many people actually clear interviews of many product companies till the final round, and then they come back to us and say they didn't clear the culture fit. And unfortunately, most people don't know what is culture fit until they get rejected. So how do you do culture fit? And how can people prepare for it? Because culture fit is something which is very company specific. Problem solving you can learn as a skill. Communication you can build a skill over time. But culture fit?
Yeah, I think culture fit is maybe, and it's the most softest of these rounds. Everything is harder in that sense. So culture fit is the most abstract thing that there is in all of this. I think each company has their own sort of, Amazon has leadership principles, Meesho has our mantras. So when we talk about culture fit, what we're trying to do is to see if this person naturally has the same sort of mantras and the same sort of innate nature, that they will not find it polar opposite to what the company is at, right? And where most of the people in the company are at, and where we expect our sort of talent to be at.
For companies like Amazon, their leadership principles are in the public domain.
So is it for Meesho? So
people can actually literally prepare against that. My question was going to be, is it so for Meesho, and do people really know about Meesho mantras? Mantras, right?
So Meesho mantras are there. They're in the public domain. So you can go and search what are the Meesho mantras.
So are the candidates told in advance that if you reach the final round, you will be interviewed against the mantras? Because then they can probably overfit their questions for it.
So I think we do expect all our candidates to kind of go through the mantras, not just for the final round, by the way, for all the rounds preceding as well. At any point, if somebody feels that this person will not be a cultural fit at Meesho, we don't want to proceed in that case, right? And culture, again, it's a very innate thing. It's many times people think of it as a right or wrong. It is not a right or wrong, right? Like I can be a great culture fit for one organization, but a complete polar opposite of another organization. And the organization is good. I am also good as an employee. It's like wedding. You don't match with everyone. Right? So in that sense, you will not match with this organization, which is absolutely fine. We shouldn't take it as a rejection in some sense. But fundamentally, I think if I could give people the advice, then it would be that, hey, do your research, look at the the mantras that are there in the public domain, understand what they mean. Maybe also some of the people have also talked to Meesho employees, talked to either current or past employees, and understood what they mean on action. That helps them do their research. One, make their mind whether this is the right place for me, whether it is something that will add value to my career. And second is also be more prepared in terms of the kind of things that might come up in an interview. So those are the two things that I would say that people should do.
Yeah, that's very helpful. I think the audience who is listening to this will definitely use it as a tip when they prepare for a Meesho interview. So all of this means getting into product is hard. And even if you get in, then also the ambiguity and the challenges make it a little difficult to figure out your way and keep growing in your role.
Yeah.
My question to you is it really worth it?
It is a sought after function, and it is generally, I would say, better sort of financially paid than a lot of the other more generalist functions. So generally, if you see pays, as the specialization increases, the value that you bring increases, because again, demand supply equation changes, as well as your ability to make outsized impact on the organization grows.
How much they can expect to make, like assuming they are working at one of these well-known product companies. So PM versus senior PM versus director, somebody at your level, like somebody who has been working for 8-10 years, how much they can expect to make, both in terms of salary and ESOPs. I think this will be helpful in terms of whether it is really worth it pursuing something so ambiguous. I think product management is only second to entrepreneurship itself in terms of ambiguity.
Yeah.
And I have done both. So you can trust me that I get the feeling.
Yeah, I think most PM roles start somewhere in the 10 to 15, 10 to 20 range at the early stages.
APM.
APM roles.
Okay.
So you can expect somewhere around the 10 to 20 mark, right? They tend to have about 8 to 10% sort of growth every year or every 2 years. And every 2 to 3 years is when you get promoted. So that's kind of the broad equation. So you can sort of extrapolate how that goes. It gets curbed at the top level because at the senior levels, you don't get as much sort of financial growth. You're sort of there because of more mission alignment, more sort of company orientation, more equation with what you want to do in your career. But that's how I don't have exact numbers, but that's how it kind of grows from, let's say, 10 to 15 to maybe slowly at the mid levels, it'll become somewhere around 30, 40, and then it keeps growing from there.
So with that, we come to the end of this episode of Airtribe Podcast with Aditya Vikram. It was very nice to have you on the podcast, and I learned so much, and I'm very confident our audience is going to learn so much from this insightful podcast with you.
Thank you for having me.